So I'm going to speak up because we don't have a mic. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Great. And unfortunately, as Annika said, Denise can't join us tonight, so you get 10 more minutes of me. Not sure if that's a good thing, but I'm here primarily to talk to you today about what we do from a planning perspective. And our mantra has always been that good, livable designs, especially in the residential realm, starts with the foundation of a good plan. And we've been at this for long enough. I guess I can consider myself now an old dog in the industry, but we've always encouraged, and I would think that those of you who are working in the multifamily residential arena try to get in as early as possible on any particular project. I'm always an advocate of the integrated approach, and I think that's terribly important, in particularly the way things are heading now. I mean, let's face it, we all know that the real estate industry in this particular market is just changing exponentially. Affordability is going to be one of the hot topics in the upcoming election, and we should not be ignorant to this. And as a result of this, and demand, of course, our homes are shrinking, so we have to respond in kind. And I always try to really look at three main sort of topics in terms of what would constitute our approach to livability. And the first one would be efficiency, and that has a lot to do with how we plan. You know, how rational are these spaces going to be? Flexibility, you know, we've got to address a whole myriad of different occupants and lifestyles. And adaptability, particularly as we start to age. What will happen in terms of what we can do to stay in our homes longer by easily changing things out? So, you know, this is, first of all, is anyone here in the real estate development industry? Or in real estate marketing? Because I promised that I would try not to trash talk any particular group, but I'm about to sort of say a few things that you may think, well, wait a minute, this is biting the hands that's feeding us, but I really can't say enough. This is pretty much prototypical of what's accepted now. It's in reality, it's actually a 520 square foot one bedroom apartment. It's pretty pedestrian. You come in, there's a small closet, there's a bathroom, a kitchen. The living room scales to be just under 9 feet in width, so it's a bit of a bowling alley space. There's maybe 5 feet of closet in there, and you know, it satisfies the requisite I guess aspirations, but truth be known, I wish that the real estate marketing and development industry would try to embrace something that goes a little bit beyond this. You know, so, you know, why not simplify life for everyone by making housing usable by more people at just a little bit of extra cost? So, aspirations, again, this is a continuation of the three main topics. So try to meet the changing needs of people throughout their lifetime, which in turn automatically limits the need for specialization. You know, we consider when we get old, for example, that we're automatically destined for a seniors type of housing. You know, anticipate requirements for higher levels of access right from the beginning so that you can start to think about future-proofing your space. And that comes naturally to make any size home as efficient as possible through smart planning. So here's an example of a typical scenario. We always favor sort of less irregularly shaped floor plates, and the partie of this building is driven by a whole number of constraints, but some of it is sometimes just because, and if you start to look at what that does to a particular apartment, you can see how with these wedge-shaped units that there's space that becomes largely compromised that you can sort of use but not really, and by the time you add up the square footage, you can see how some of these things really don't give you that much more value. But here's an example. Some of what we've done are office building conversions. Our first project was actually the old BC Hydro building downtown, and it wasn't until the City of Vancouver placed a moratorium on any conversions of this type that we were able to really get into the spirit of repurposing, and I think that's part of livability as well. This was the West Coast Transmission Building. It's one of 2 buildings in the world that is cable stayed. You can see how the main structure is in terms of the core, and the straps or the cables come down onto the corners into the midsections of the building to support each floor. We were assigned to, first of all, take a blank floor plate and to rationalize it into apartments. And you can see, I mean, this is an extreme case since it's a perfectly square floor plate, but already you can see how much easier it is to lay out everything from compact spaces. In this case, it's a 475 square foot bathroom. But you can see we were still able to fit a 4-piece ensuite in there and still have a goodly enough a proportion of space for living. That's the 2-bedroom unit right there, which is just under 900 square feet. And it was at this time, and this was 10 years ago now, that we started looking at how we could innovate a little bit more and not just go with sort of the status quo. For example, we came up with this idea because, we kept asking, how much do you really need? How much more can you save in terms of space and be kinder to the environment in terms of usage? So in this case, we came up with what we called the cheater ensuite. So on the master bedroom side, it was a 4-piece, and then the powder room was adjacent to it. Then we just opened the tub for access on both sides. There was an additional benefit that the daylight was able to spill right through into the entry, which you can see at the far end. So can we live big in small spaces? The answer is yes, provided that you position how you organize these spaces in as rational and as efficient a manner as possible. I know I keep repeating these things, but I can't do that enough. This is an image of that particular 475 square foot unit that was on that plan, where there's implied space to define where your sleeping area is going to be. There's still storage. There's the main living area. The ones below are the larger units. And I'd like to point out too that the turnover in this particular building is very low, which tells me that people are wanting and able to stay in there for a longer period. So it's obvious that spaces are getting smaller, but because we're getting much more sophisticated in terms of what we're looking for in a home, that those expectations are getting larger and the needs haven't really changed. So, this is an example of how we've had to really keep raising the bar in terms of planning small homes. This is a section of a tower that we've just finished in terms of the design, and it's everything from a 375 square foot studio in the middle to a 540 square foot 1-bedroom and den, and a 670 square foot 2-bedroom 2-bathroom unit. And it sounds oppressive. Some of it works, and I know that a large part of these display suites are really meant to, help the marketers sort of sell product. We try wherever we can to demonstrate, here's some little tips that maybe you can do easily on your own. For example, we put up slat wall in the entries for storing things. The closets pull out in this case rather than having them front loaded because there's minimal wall space. The bed is a trundle type that pulls out part way to act as a sofa during the day, and then the platform is work and small dining space. For the 1-bedroom and den, just by changing the proportion of what was supposed to be a 40 square foot room, this became large enough for a small bedroom / workspace / retreat area. And as compact as it is, as long as you distill it down to the basics and what's truly going to be important, it's going to work for you. This is kind of tongue-in-cheek. It's really not palatial. I mean, that's the 670 square foot unit. But again, it has all of the basics in terms of what someone's going to be looking for. But again, this is sort of what it's becoming. It's another tower where we were assigned with planning out and demising it into small homes. And in this case, this is a 2-bedroom and den, 617 square foot unit. What we did here was we eliminated all of the circulation so that everything opens out onto the main living space. The reason for that is because, theoretically, an investor would buy this and advertise it as rent this 2-bedroom and den unit and get a roommate. But if it was just a couple living here, you wouldn't really need to use that for a second bedroom. And that's shots of the mock-up done there, so you can see how by integrating circulation, you can achieve that level of efficiency. What's important is to treat the common areas of an extension of these very compact homes, because let's face it, I mean, you don't want to be shoeboxed in some of these apartments all the time. So these common areas become more and more of a factor of livability, because really it is about the total package. Livability can be anything from the location, whether you're close to transit, what kind of neighborhood amenities you have, and then within an apartment building or a condo building itself, then the amenities become important. So here's an example where we try to consolidate everything into one area rather than distributing it throughout the building. So it becomes fitness, central lounge, meeting that acts as communal dining, a workshop for tinkering away at things. It's kind of cut off at the top. There's a guest suite as well, a dog wash, outdoor space. So what that does is it encourages sort of more of a community area where people can actually have what I call accidental interaction, because it kind of encourages that sort of collective engagement, because we are somewhat segregated in these small individual homes. And lobbies don't necessarily just have to be for walking into and going to the elevator. This is a project of ours in Seattle. It's a rental apartment building, but we suggested that the entry lobby also act as a place for community interaction. And in this case, there's a little coffee bar in there next to the office, and a meeting room that is available to the residents to use, soft seating before you get to the elevator. It's not only in this market. A lot of the work that we do seems to involve planning for small space. And here's an example of a 265 square foot module that we developed for a 900 unit apartment building in Beijing. So the first thing we looked at was what would inspire us. And at the time, I was just going through an RV rental place thinking I was going to get one of these vehicles to drive back east. And the more I looked at these, the more I thought, wait a minute, this is actually pretty smart planning. So we applied some of those principles to this particular unit. Everything is right down to the square inch in terms of planning. There's no conventional framing. All of the partitions are glass. There's the other view there where you can see you come in, it's a glass bathroom with just a toilet and a shower. The sink is actually across the hall in one of the closets. There's room for a queen bed, and then living space, workspace, and a kitchen. And then that's one of the views looking from the entry, and then looking the other way. Adaptability should be part of this, as I said earlier, and try to make it as easy as possible. This is a single-family home example. This was I'll be blunt. It's not in Vancouver. There's no way that a young family could afford to build something like this unless they had the bank of many other people behind them. It was a couple and their little girl. So they wanted to stay in this particular neighborhood, and we looked at everything from the notion of having the front porch to the scale of the house, being within the context of the street. The flat roof portion is actually their daughter's craft room, but it's positioned next to a full bathroom so that it would become a ground floor bedroom in case of mobility issues. Because of shortage of yard space, we added rooftop space coming off of one of the principal bedrooms. And you can see how it engages with the street. So it wasn't necessarily about coming up with an envelope that took over, but in this case I think it fits quite nicely with what is obviously a mixture of different vintage of houses. And this is part of the interiors. The reason I've said that there's more to this than meets the eye is because they actually were under a very tight budget. All of the appliances, unfortunately they didn't get them at Trail, they actually got them through Kijiji. So everything was used. The cabinet carcasses were salvaged from another site. The flooring was put down before the island so that when the time came, because they felt that there would be a day when they wouldn't necessarily need that or they would have to lower everything, they would just get rid of that and then continue in the same vein of just having very simple open spaces. They didn't want anything to do with clutter, so that all the walls were used for storage. And again, instead of having segregated spaces, it was really predicated on almost a loft style of plan so that they could adapt to whatever their future needs are going to be. And then we always encourage, sort of natural elements to bring light through spaces as much as possible. So that's the stair detail that we used in this case. Here's another single-family home that we recently completed. This is in the city of Vancouver. It's an interesting story because it's a heritage house that caught fire and it was badly damaged in the rear. So they had to not only rebuild, but they wanted to actually reinterpret that and come up with a more contemporary version of what was on the front. So this is what we came up with, which is, and I have to apologize, these are construction photos, but this became our interpretation of redefining tradition. So you still have the whole idea of a porch coming off of the yard, and because of setback restrictions, we came up with this horizontal bifold door that becomes a canopy to protect yourself from the elements, but it opens up the interior space quite nicely to the yard. And then again, we looked at preparing them again for the what-if scenarios. The stair shot is really meant to show that we placed any of the stairs against the shear wall so that it would be very easy to anchor a stair lift device in the future if necessary. Instead of a backsplash, we put in windows so that it would increase the amount of light right on a work surface, because as we get older, our vision tends to get impaired as well. So that begs the question, we all are aging, so really does that mean that we have to surrender to whatever the perceived images of living as a senior? Well, the answer is no. This is an apartment that we did a few years ago for a couple in their 70s, and the first thing they said to us was, we don't want to look like we live as seniors. But at the same time, one of the owners was already quite compromised in his ability to move around. So we didn't really tell them what we were doing because they didn't really want to hear anything like that, but we sort of snuck things in. So you can see on the right-hand side, that's sort of the standard in terms of aisle width. So 4 feet was the minimum for that. We encouraged them to consider furniture that they could lift off a little more easily from. In the kitchens, the breakfast table is actually meant to be a work surface height for someone who's going to be in a chair at one point in their lives. And the Dan library right adjacent to it, the door opening was deliberately larger so that that would be easily accessed if they had to put a bed in there. And in their bathroom, we backed all of the fronts so that we could attach safety bars that act as towel rails. You can see in the reflection that there's a standard height vanity behind, and then that's a curbless shower to the left. The one concession was the freestanding tub, which they said that they weren't ready for the tub with a gate just yet. So. So what's next? This is a project that we're currently working on, and I'm revisiting this particular unit because this was what was served up to us in terms of preliminary plans. So we said, okay, let's put a little bit of thought into this. And we decided that no matter what size, we should really consider how we can zone these. So the first thing was to just establish where the living spaces were, which obviously is towards the windows because of the greater exposure to light. The second is to try to be efficient with all of the utility spaces. And then, of course, to join the two, there's an intermediary or a mitigator that acts as a unifier between utility and living. So this is what we came up with. When you come in, instead of just having circulation, it's now a storage walk, and it's 14.5 foot of storage. There's no closet in the bedroom, but it's just right adjacent to you because you just have to pop out through the sliding door opening. So that gives you that much more flexibility to use that room. The storage, bathroom, all of the plumbing stacks are centralized, and then it's kind of hard to see with that jog in the wall, but it's all predicated on having the perception of a larger space, but having still additional horizontal surface, and then adding interior glazing to carry light in further. That's it showing with furniture, and you can see how it starts to sort of present possibilities. And then you can see again how the zoning principle starts to work in terms of how you consolidate your plan in this fashion. So utility in one space, the intermediary, which is the kitchen that everyone rotates around, and then the main living space. And then you can see from a building technology standpoint how efficient that makes construction potentially, because you're having everything to do with the building infrastructure in one space. You're actually allowing a central bulkhead for supply and for air distribution, and the way that the spaces are positioned, you're allowing for greater opportunities for daylight penetration. And if things change, well, if it's a work-live situation, the closets aren't framed in so that they're mobile enough that you can reposition them or refurnish at will. And then you can start to see what I meant about that funny wall. So if you just consider that this is just straightforward steel studs framing, adding the same counter material as the kitchen on top, suddenly you've expanded the workspace for a whole number of uses. And then there's enough space on the bedroom side to slide something underneath for storage. And then you get that perception of a larger living space on the other side. And there's the bird's eye view, which gives you a much better look at how that plays out. And remember, it's 520 square feet. So, you know, and that's why we should all try to remember these things, you know, to look at the changing needs of people throughout their lifetime, which will lessen and probably preclude any kind of specialization. Try to think about requirements for needing higher levels of accessibility because we're all getting older. And really, at the end of the day, just think about how you can make your homes that much more efficient through smart planning. So that's all I've got. I'm going to hand this over to Ada because I've talked enough, but thank you.